I often describe you guys to people as, so many different companies right now say that they are doing AI.
Yeah.
But you guys are actually like building the brain that is AI. Is that sort of right? So was I right?
You were right.
Perfect.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So I convinced two founders to start looking at co-working spaces around the city.
Right.
So we started walking around and touring various locations around the city. And one of the things that I noticed was that there were like a few of the ones we went to felt cold in a way. And the reason, what I mean by that is like you would go in and it just felt like people were there and there wasn't much energy in the space. Like people just came and they worked and it didn't feel like there was much else going on in a lot of these spaces. But then one of the things, and I've talked to you about this before, is when I came in here the first time and I saw the beer tap, it actually was, it meant more than just like having like free beer.
Yeah.
Like there's more to it than that. It sort of sets a tone for what the culture of the space is like. And that's one of the things that showed me that this place was different, was that it was more sort of like this community-based place. I just felt like having a change of space would be nice. But then as like I got to know the space and the people and like some of the things you guys do, like the Drink Nicer events or other events, I thought it would be a great idea for the entire team to do that on Fridays. And that's when we started coming on Fridays. There's so many people that pass through the space because of the way it's structured.
Yeah.
Because you have people that do the rotating desks and stuff, and the rotating tables. So there's a lot of people coming in and coming out at different times.
Right.
So this is a high volume of people that you can meet and interact with here. Whereas like, sure, we could go out and like do some local events or like go to some bars and meet people. But I think there's a commonality between everyone here. Like there's a very entrepreneurial spirit here, which I think for any like startup company, and especially us, was a big draw, is that you have other people that are ambitious, that have like big goals. And it's almost easier to connect with people like that if you're that way.
Right.
And it's hard to find, like if you're going out to some random bar or it's like some random event, meeting people that have that same like personality or the same sort of, I guess,
just mentality,
interest,
right?
yeah,
It's like
mentality.
it's a weird breed of people
Yeah.
that think in that same way.
Right.
And so now, rather than going out to those bars to try and find those people, you're going out to the bars like with those people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think it's given me a lot more than just a place to work. It really does have that. It really has given me a community of people and a community of friends that I think I'll probably be friends with for the rest of my life. But so I think that's a very powerful thing. And I don't know if the other co-working spaces that we toured would have given the same, because it goes back to that feeling of being cold. And I think what happens with that is, it's like, I don't know, I guess for you, it's like, what made you focus on community or like focus on building a nice culture? And also, how do you build a culture? It's more of a reaction to how people are like reacting to what you're doing, or did you have a plan at the beginning of how you wanted the culture to be, or was it more of like osmosis sort of situation?
I actually really love that question, because a lot of people think that culture is purely organic, plain and simple. You throw a bunch of people in a room or in a situation and culture happens. And like something will happen, but that doesn't mean that it's intentional or that it's what you want, right? And so from the very beginning, we actually opened, I don't know if you knew this, but we actually opened in a different space than this. So it's like we opened it in a smaller space. It was half the size of this. It felt even smaller, very traditional office. And we had to work really, really hard to build that culture, because really that's all that we had. It was kind of like, boring office, chopped up. The space and the design didn't lend itself to getting people connecting. Like, we didn't have the beer or the coffee or any of the other perks that we have right now. And so it's like all we have is culture. And so we spent all of our time connecting people together. And it helped that when we started, it was 10 friends, right? It was 10 of my friends that came in and said, I believe in this idea, or I believe in you, or something. For some reason they said, yep, okay, we'll try this thing out. And so that was helpful, because the relationships were there. And then when new people came in, they automatically got connected into this kind of a family. And so, and things change. I mean, most of those founding members aren't here anymore. Some of them have moved away, some of them have outgrown the space or changed their business direction, but some still are, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, from a culture perspective, it's like that was always the intent. But we never truly understood who we were until a year and a half in. I think that it was spending that year and a half or so that we really figured out, it's like, okay, this is who we are, this is what we've got, even though we knew that we were heading in the right direction, if that makes sense. And so it's kind of like, back to the whole organic thing, it's like, I think that this stuff is organic and you have to connect the right kind of people together, but it's got to be intentional. We point these people that are here kind of in a certain direction, and we try and keep them kind of in that direction, and it will organically grow, right? Similar to anything else that grows organically, like a garden or whatever. It's like if you don't tend to that garden, it's just going to get unwieldy, right? And it's the same kind of thing here. And if we notice any kind of cultural problems, whether it's potential new members that are coming in or things have changed for existing members, then yeah, we need to go and nip that in the butt and make sure it's like, hey, this does not align with a culture perspective, and we don't care about the money side of it. And that's always been a thing from the very beginning, is that we make decisions not based on money. And that's really hard to do because it's not like we had tons of money at the beginning. Or even now, to be honest, we're growing and expanding. It's like we're spending everything we're making, right? And it's true faith in that process and faith in that culture, and that we know who we are and that we're not necessarily for everyone, but for the people that we are for, it's going to work out very well and they're going to be here for a long time.
So do you find that focusing or not using money necessarily as a deciding factor in some of the decisions, do you find that focusing on culture and community maybe in the short term is monetary, I guess, impact, but in the long term, do you feel like that is what makes Work Nicer stand out, is that you're making those decisions based on what's best for the community? Yeah. And that's in the long term going to play out and build the culture out in I guess, more of an impactful way?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's this infinite loop. It's like culture is the business model and the business model is culture. Yeah. Right? And one will feed the other. And you can't, it has to be, and it's a long-term play, right? And we're banking largely on karma, right? It's like we give more than we get, and hopefully overall that means we all win down the road, right? That's really what it is. And so, yeah, especially early days. I mean, now, all of our private offices are always full. If somebody moves out for whatever reason or upgrades to a bigger office, then the new office is full within a week every time. But at the beginning, it wasn't always that way. And so when somebody comes in and they say, hey, I'll take this office, and it's 20, 30 grand a year, it's like, man, that would be really nice. But we gotta say no to that kind of stuff. Yeah. That stuff's hard, but that's the stuff that people notice. And even if we don't go and broadcast that or tell people, they'll know that we're intentional about who's here. And it's funny because I think a lot of people know that this stuff is important, but a lot of people have a tough time executing it. Right. Because people will come to us and they'll say, so is there an application process here? And we'll say, yep, but you just don't know about it. Yeah. Right? So you don't sit there and fill this application form, which a lot of other spaces and a lot of other cities that I've visited do in an attempt to curate and cultivate culture. Yeah. But I think that it's like a job interview or a resume. I find those that'd be very easy to fake and to fluff. Yeah. Right. And so we've spent a lot of time as a team talking about culture, and our small team, I think, is extremely intuitive, and we know when things are going to be the right fit and not the right fit. And it's never a discussion of money. It's just it's always, is it the right fit? Is it the right fit? Does this make sense? And the nice thing is now is that because we know who we are and we tell people that, is that we're attracting the right people. So very, very rarely do we have to say, sorry, this isn't the right fit. Yeah. People self-sort, and that's because we're confident in who we are and we're transparent about who we are.
When you're trying to build a culture for a singular company, it might be a little easier, I find, potentially, but when you're building a culture for a co-working space that's going to have so many diverse companies in different sectors, you have tech, you have consulting, you have whatever variety of companies you have here, how do you make a culture that works for all of those guys?
Yeah, it's a fun question. I think it goes back a little bit to the previous one, but at the end of the day, it's here you're not defined by what you do, but it's who you are, through and through. So sometimes that can get a little tricky when teams come in, because we often will meet with a decision maker or a team lead or the business owner, and then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, whatever other people that we're kind of like are just accepting. But I think again it comes down to truly knowing who we are and being transparent with that. And then and just also setting expectations, right? When you're a member here, yes, you've got your own business to run 100%, we're here to serve you, but we just want to make sure that every member here is also a part of this community and bought into that culture and cares about it as much as we do.
I think you hit on something there that I think did answer the question in a way, and it was about the mission statement, or like defining a mission statement, or trying to define culture like from an ivory tower kind of. And I think just from my perspective, what works here is like that the community actually, it's the feedback loop, right? So the community feeds back into the culture and it evolves over time. So it's not like you've set these bounds of what the culture is,
Totally.
and then, you know, everyone's supposed to be within that culture space, if that's the phrase I can use.
Yep.
But like the idea was that the community itself is defining the culture, and I guess you're adapting and trying to guide it into a certain area, but you're not like defining this mission statement and saying this is it.
Totally. That's it. It's like we'll take all that feedback, and it's the community that builds this thing, right? So many people think it is like it's us and this team, or it's me. And it's like, this place would be super boring if it was just me, right?
Yeah.
It's like I didn't,
exactly.
you know, it's like we set it on the right path, and the community does what they will with it. And sometimes we'll have to, you know, put up bumpers, like when you're bowling, you put like the bumpers. It's like we gotta put up bumpers so we can kind of bounce back and forth between certain places and try and keep it in our lane. But for the most part, it's like, yeah, if you have the right people and you're really intentional about that, then the right things will happen. And that maybe is the organic piece. But I think it's also important, it is to say like, this is who we are.
So we've been talking about the community and culture, and one of the things that I'm curious about is how that scales and how it stays as good as it is. And I guess we could go back to when I used to be at the Stephen Avenue location. It was before we had the Roxbury location, and I was part of that expansion into a new space. And the situation where there was two, they're disjointed physically, but how did you maintain the connection of community between the two locations? And how do you plan to do that? Because I know you have the Edmonton location opening up later this year. So how do you plan to make that work at a larger scale?
You know, it's a good question. And that's actually probably where we spend most of our time as a team talking. It's like, that was the biggest worry with opening Roxbury. It's like, it's one thing to continue growing and bring on new members and keep those connections happening, but how do you do that in another physical space? And to be honest, like, even though we're close, it's only 8 or 10 minute walk from here, I think that like we would have had that same conversation had it been another floor, right? Because you are physically disjointed regardless of which one it is. And so, I mean, I do think it was helpful that we were close so our team could go. But the thing that we always talk about, and so our current strategy is to transplant culture, right? And so that's where it was great having you guys move into Roxbury amongst a few other people from here. Is that like, there's people here that understand what Work Nicer is all about, that love this place, that are bought in, and we have shared values in that way. So then it's like to have some of those people go there and really transplant that culture and let all the new people grow out of that. I think that was successful. I do think there are differences between the two locations, which had you asked me before we opened, I would have tried really, really hard to avoid. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing now that I've seen how it works. And we've heard from our members that it's a good thing. People will go to different locations for different reasons. And so what we've done is we've expanded the toolbox, right? We've expanded the toolbox for our members. So now there's another different type of workspace and a different type of location to go to based on what you're working on or who you're working with or what have you. And so that I think was mostly a success. There's been some bumps and we're still trying to iron out some of those things, but we're figuring it out. The important thing is that it is top of mind and it's our number one conversation. And so as we talk about Edmonton, that again is the number one fear. Honestly, it's we spend more time talking about that than anything else. And so we've been up there a ton. It's probably been a year to year and a half of building relationships and getting to know people up there before, as you know, we're not even open. We've only announced that we are opening a few months ago, and We've really been making those connections and sponsoring events and adding value where we can in Edmonton before, just even in the exploratory realm. And to be honest, we did that not because we said, okay, we're going to open in Edmonton, let's go make friends. I thought, it's just like, why do none of us know anybody in Edmonton? We're 3 hours up the road. Why are we not connecting with these people? There's people back and forth all the time. That stretch of highway is one of the busiest stretches of highway in the country. It's like, so why is nobody really connecting? And so said, well, let's go connect, let's make friends and see what happens. And one thing led to another. And very quickly, it became evident that at some point down the road, that Edmonton would be really excited to have us there. And I think that, again, we're doing something differently. And not to mention that we're building this bridge between the two cities, and our members, again, from a toolbox perspective, just another tool that they can use, and it's going to be really exciting to see what they do. And so a lot of people ask us, like, are you hiring in Edmonton? What are you going to do from that perspective? And that would be easy. We've had several people approach us about a position in Edmonton and running things up there, and we're not going to do it. Because similarly, from a transplanting culture perspective, I think it's really important that we are the ones that do that to begin with. And so it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of miles and a lot of trips. And we're just trusting that similarly to what happened here in Calgary is that the right people will emerge that truly get it as we've went and transplanted that culture out there.
Like these big companies that come in and they buy office space and just chop it up and have offices everywhere without that community aspect.
Yeah, I think it's just different ultimately, right? I think it goes back to who are you? And I think it's a lot of people talk about this community thing, but they don't exactly know what that means or how to get there. Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily bad either. I think that's the thing is that everybody calls co-working just shared office. And I think there is a difference between those two things. And I think shared office has its place, right? I think chopping up square footage and renting out individual offices has a place, right? There's certain people that don't want to talk to anyone. They need to get out of their house for whatever reason. That's great. Go do that thing. And I think Work Nicer is that great middle ground, especially with some of our private offices. But again, those people are the right people who wouldn't be happy with an office at Regis either, because they want to interact. It's like you guys, like you want to interact with the community at large. And so I think that's like the biggest problem, honestly, with this whole co-working movement is the definition of co-working. And there's so many differences of opinion in terms of what that is. But I think if people are truly honest with themselves, like I said, sometimes it's shared office space, sometimes it's co-working. Mm-hmm. They're two different things. One's not necessarily better than the other. One is just suited for a different clientele than the other. Mm-hmm.